The air crackled with a tension I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the usual pre-dinner flutter of anticipation, the kind that accompanied a romantic evening with my husband, Robert. No, this was different, raw, electric. My eyes, drawn by an invisible force, kept darting towards the corner of the bustling cafe. There he sat, a vision of youthful energy, his broad shoulders contrasting sharply with the faded denim of his jeans. He was laughing, a deep, resonant sound that sent shivers down my spine. I'd first noticed him a week ago, a chance encounter at the local farmer's market. My gaze had been drawn to his effortless grace, the way the sunlight seemed to catch the gold flecks in his dark eyes. He was unlike anyone I knew, a vibrant whirlwind of life, a stark contrast to the comfortable predictability of my life with Robert. Robert, my husband of 20 years, was a good man, a solid foundation. He provided for our family, was a loving father to our children. But somewhere along the line, the fire between us had dimmed, replaced by a comfortable routine. The passion had cooled, replaced by a gentle warmth, a comfortable companionship. And then there was him. His name was Jamal, I learned from the hushed whispers around the cafe. He worked at the bookstore down the street, a quiet, unassuming presence that belied the intensity that radiated from him. He caught me staring, a mischievous glint in his eyes, and offered a slow, captivating smile. My breath hitched in my throat. That first encounter had ignited a spark within me, a dormant ember that I hadn't even realized was still alive. It was a thrilling, terrifying sensation, a reminder of the vibrant, untamed woman I used to be. The days that followed were a whirlwind of stolen glances, fleeting touches, and a constant hum of anticipation. I found myself drawn to the bookstore more often than usual, ostensibly to browse, but really to bask in his presence. He would appear beside me, his scent of sandalwood and old books enveloping me in an intoxicating haze. One afternoon, while browsing the poetry section, he slipped a small, leather-bound book into my hand. "For you," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a collection of love poems, the words raw and passionate, mirroring the emotions that were beginning to consume me. As I read, my heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just a casual flirtation. This was something deeper, something more intense. That evening, I found myself unable to focus on Robert's conversation. Jamal's image kept intruding, his touch, his smile, his words echoing in my mind. I felt a surge of guilt, a familiar pang of conscience, but it was quickly overshadowed by a thrilling sense of liberation, a forbidden yearning that I couldn't ignore. The next day, Jamal called. His voice, husky with a hint of nervousness, sent a jolt of excitement through me. "I was hoping," he began, his words hesitant, "that maybe we could have coffee sometime." My heart leaped. "I'd like that," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. We met at a small, out-of-the-way cafe, the air thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by stolen glances and nervous laughter. He was intelligent, insightful, and surprisingly deep for his age. We talked about everything and nothing, about books, music, our dreams, our fears. As the afternoon wore on, the air between us grew heavy with unspoken desires. His eyes, dark and intense, held mine captive. I felt a strange pull toward him, a primal urge that I hadn't experienced in years. Finally, he leaned in, his breath warm on my face. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice husky with desire. The words, simple yet profound, ignited a fire within me. I leaned into his touch, my senses reeling, my inhibitions melting away. His kiss was a revelation, a whirlwind of passion and intensity. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced, a raw, primal experience that left me breathless. As we pulled apart, our eyes met, a silent understanding passing between us. This was just the beginning. The affair blossomed like a forbidden flower, blooming in the shadows of our ordinary lives. Our meetings were clandestine, whispered promises exchanged in hurried phone calls, stolen glances across crowded rooms. The thrill of the secret added a dangerous edge to our encounters, a constant hum of adrenaline pulsing through my veins. Jamal, with his youthful energy and insatiable curiosity, awakened a part of me I thought had long since faded. He introduced me to new experiences, new sensations. We explored hidden corners of the city, danced until the early hours of the morning, and spent hours lost in conversation, our minds and bodies intertwined. He was a whirlwind of passion, his touch electrifying, his kisses leaving me breathless. He seemed to know exactly where to touch, what to whisper, to ignite a fire within me that I thought had long since been extinguished. One afternoon, he took me to his apartment, a small bohemian space filled with books, art, and the scent of incense. As we explored his world, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. I shed the inhibitions that had been slowly creeping into my life, embracing the spontaneity and joy that had been missing. He showed me a side of myself I had almost forgotten, a woman who was vibrant, adventurous, and unapologetically herself. He encouraged my passions, listened to my dreams, and made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. The physical intimacy between us deepened with each encounter. His body, lean and muscular, moved with a grace that took my breath away. He was a master of pleasure, exploring every inch of my body with a tenderness that both surprised and exhilarated me. One evening, after a particularly intense encounter, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and awe. "You're incredible," he breathed, his voice husky with emotion, more beautiful than I ever imagined. His words, raw and sincere, sent a jolt of pleasure through me. I felt a surge of confidence, a newfound sense of self-worth that I hadn't felt in years. But the intoxicating thrill of the affair was laced with a constant undercurrent of anxiety. The fear of discovery was a constant companion, a shadow looming over our stolen moments. I lived in a state of perpetual unease, my senses heightened, always on the lookout for any sign of suspicion from Robert. Guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the betrayal I was committing. I tried to justify my actions, to convince myself that my marriage was already dead, that I was simply seeking a connection that had long since vanished. But the guilt was persistent, a nagging voice in the back of my mind. I worried about the impact on my children, the potential for heartbreak and shattered trust. Despite the anxieties, the pull towards Jamal was undeniable. He was a drug, addictive and intoxicating. I craved his touch, his laughter, the feeling of being completely and utterly lost in his embrace. One evening, as we lay intertwined, the weight of my guilt finally became unbearable. "I'm afraid," I confessed, my voice trembling, afraid of getting caught, afraid of hurting everyone. He held me close, his arms a comforting embrace. "Don't worry," he whispered, his voice soothing. "We'll be careful. We'll find a way to make this work." His words offered a temporary reprieve, but the fear remained, a constant undercurrent in the euphoria of our affair. The physical changes began to manifest subtly at first. A newfound confidence in my gait, a sparkle in my eyes that seemed to have been missing for years. I started to dress differently, embracing bolder colors and more daring styles. Robert noticed the changes, of course. "You seem different lately," he commented one evening, his brow furrowed. "More alive." I brushed off his comment, attributing the changes to a newfound sense of self-discovery. "I'm just trying to rediscover myself," I explained, forcing a smile. He seemed unconvinced, his gaze lingering on me with a disconcerting intensity. I felt a surge of panic, my heart pounding against my ribs. The fear of discovery intensified with each passing day. I became increasingly paranoid, constantly scanning my surroundings for any sign of suspicion. I deleted our text messages, made sure to never leave any incriminating evidence behind. But the changes in my body were becoming harder to conceal. My breasts seemed fuller, my hips wider. I attributed it to exercise, to the increased energy I felt since I had met Jamal. But the explanation sounded hollow, even to my own ears. The weight of my lies began to feel suffocating. I longed for honesty, for a way to escape the suffocating web of deceit I had woven around myself. The physical changes, once subtle, were now impossible to ignore. My breasts had grown noticeably fuller, a subtle fullness that no amount of clever dressing could disguise. My hips had widened, my curves more pronounced, a feminine sensuality that seemed to radiate from every pore of my skin. Robert, ever observant, finally confronted me one evening. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with a mixture of concern and suspicion. "You've changed. You look different." My heart pounded in my chest. I forced a smile, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm just feeling good," I stammered, "more confident." He looked at me skeptically. "Is that all? Because it seems like more than just confidence." Panic surged through me. I felt like a deer caught in the headlights, my mind racing, desperately searching for a plausible explanation. "It's just hormones," I blurted out. "Women's bodies are constantly changing." He raised an eyebrow. "Hormones? At your age?" I knew my explanation sounded unconvincing, even to myself. I tried to change the subject, to deflect his attention, but he was relentless. "Have you been seeing someone else?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Of course not," I denied, my voice trembling. "Why would you even think that?" He didn't answer, his gaze unwavering, searching mine for any sign of deception. The silence that followed was deafening, the tension in the air thick and palpable. I spent the next few days in a state of constant anxiety. I avoided Robert's gaze, my mind consumed by the fear of discovery. I slept poorly, haunted by nightmares of him confronting me, of him discovering the truth. Then disaster struck. I was at the grocery store mindlessly browsing the aisles when I saw him, Jamal walking down the aisle, his hand brushing against a display of fruits. He saw me too, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Panic seized me. I turned and fled, my heart pounding against my ribs. I raced through the store, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. I knew I couldn't risk another encounter like that. I had to end things with Jamal, and quickly. That evening I called him, my voice trembling. "We need to stop," I said. my voice barely a whisper. I can't do this anymore. He was stunned. What? Why? What's wrong? It's too dangerous, I explained, my voice breaking. Robert is suspicious. I can't risk getting caught. He was silent for a moment, then sighed. I understand, he said, his voice laced with disappointment. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose you either, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. But it's for the best. The following days were a blur of withdrawal and denial. I avoided going to places where I might run into Jamal. I deleted his number from my phone. I tried to erase any trace of him from my life. But the memories lingered, vivid and haunting. The touch of his hands, the sound of his laughter, the intensity of his gaze. I felt a constant ache in my chest, a longing for the passion and excitement that had filled my life for a brief, intoxicating period. The physical changes, however, remained. They were a constant reminder of the affair, a physical manifestation of the forbidden pleasures I had experienced. Robert, sensing my unease, tried to be understanding. He brought me flowers, cooked my favorite meals, tried to rekindle the spark that had dimmed between us. But the damage was done. The trust between us was irrevocably broken. The shadow of doubt lingered, a constant reminder of the betrayal I had committed. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The woman I had been before the affair seemed to have vanished, replaced by a stranger, a woman haunted by guilt and regret. And one evening, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I realized that I couldn't continue living this way. I had to face the consequences of my actions, to confront the truth, however painful it might be. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound resolve. I would tell Robert the truth, lay bare my soul, and face whatever consequences awaited me. The truth tumbled out in a torrent of words, a desperate confession spilling from my lips. I sat across from Robert, his face a mask of disbelief and hurt. I poured out my heart, the details of the affair, the intoxicating thrill of it all, the physical and emotional changes that had taken place. He listened in silence, his eyes darkening as I spoke. When I finally finished, a long silence followed, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. Why, he finally asked, his voice low and dangerous. Why did you do this to me? The question hit me like a physical blow. I don't know, I whispered, the tears finally spilling down my cheeks. I don't know. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. You destroyed something beautiful, he said, his voice trembling. 20 years of our lives shattered because of a fleeting infatuation. The words cut deep. I knew he was right. I had shattered the foundation of our marriage, the trust that had taken years to build. The aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, disbelief, hurt, and finally, a crushing sense of loneliness. Robert moved out, taking a room at a friend's house. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. The emptiness in the house a constant reminder of the void he had left behind. Our children, initially oblivious, soon began to sense the tension in the air. Their questions, innocent and curious, were a constant reminder of the damage I had caused. I spent the following weeks in a haze of grief and self-loathing. I felt like a shell of my former self, haunted by the ghosts of my past. The physical changes, once a source of pride, now served as a constant reminder of my betrayal, a daily reminder of the woman I had become. I sought solace in therapy, pouring out my heart to a stranger, seeking guidance, seeking forgiveness. The therapist listened patiently, offering words of comfort and encouragement. Slowly, I began to piece myself back together. I started to exercise, to reconnect with my body, to rediscover the woman I had lost. I focused on my work, immersing myself in my career, trying to find a sense of purpose and direction. I reached out to Jamal, apologizing for the abrupt end to our affair. He was understanding, forgiving. He wished me well, hoping that I would find peace and happiness. The process of healing was slow and arduous. There were days when the pain was unbearable, when the memories of the affair threatened to consume me. But slowly, gradually, I began to see glimmers of hope. I learned to forgive myself, not for the affair itself, but for the pain I had caused. I learned to accept the consequences of my actions, to take responsibility for my choices. Robert and I eventually began to communicate again, tentatively at first, then with increasing frequency. We attended counseling sessions, learning to navigate the complexities of our broken relationship. The road to recovery was long and winding, filled with setbacks and disappointments. But slowly, gradually, we began to rebuild our lives, piece by piece. The affair had irrevocably changed me, leaving an indelible mark on my soul. But it had also forced me to confront my deepest desires, to explore the depths of my own sexuality. I learned that life is unpredictable, that passion can ignite unexpectedly, that the choices we make have far-reaching consequences. I learned to embrace the unknown, to live in the present moment, to cherish the beauty and fragility of life. The affair, though a painful experience, had ultimately led to a profound transformation. I had emerged from the ashes, a stronger, wiser, more authentic version of myself.